This episode is brought to you by Cars Commerce, one platform to simplify everything about buying and selling cars, and one partner to empower your business. Welcome to this special Disruptive Forces in Retail Automotive episode presented by the David Spizak Show and Disruptive Growth Solutions. Welcome back. I am extremely happy to welcome Yossi Levi, who is a car dealership guy now for a period of time. This gentleman burst onto the scene of not just retail automotive, but whether you are in retail automotive, whether you're an OEM, whether you were an independent, whether you were just somebody who loves cars, all of a sudden, the car dealership guy jumped onto the scene, and none of us, literally none of us, including me, had any idea who was behind this. And then I believe it was Yossi, wasn't it? NADA last year was the big reveal, right?
That was it.
Was the face came off and we saw the human behind this. And, you know, during the time pre-reveal and post, you've had a tremendous impact in the industry, not just as a media company, but you've also, you know, your podcast has had just absolutely tremendous guests that you've had on where we've been able to learn from those folks. You've also started this job post board, which just seemed initially, from my perspective, seemed like almost, hey, I want to do something for the industry. And bam, it just took a life of its own. But above and beyond everything else, you're a used car dealer. I mean, you started, literally, it seemed like you were born into the used car industry. I want to thank you first and foremost for joining me. Thank you for that. But can you start off with just talking to us about your experience in the used car industry and what did you learn that perhaps people in the used car industry as operators, independent or franchise, can potentially leverage today?
David, thanks for having me on. It's funny to be on the other end of the interview. I'm not used to this, so we'll have to get used to it real quick. Look, you said many things there that are correct, which is I was born into this industry. I never thought that I would stay, and I think many of us have experienced that. And as growing up, I started many different businesses. It's very entrepreneurial. Didn't really know that about myself yet, but went to college, studied finance, and just found myself innately just wanted to keep helping the family business because that was everything for us. And so at a certain point in my early 20s, I got really, really involved in the family used car business. And I said, you know what, there's a lot of opportunity here. I feel like if I bring, some good strategy to this business, we can grow it. And I'll do this a couple of years and then I'll leave. What happened was I felt like I got really good at it after, 5, 6, 7 years. And at that point I was sucked in and I said, wow, let's take this thing to the next level, which brought me to my next business and my next one, which we'll talk about. But I think at its core, for me growing up in this used car business, I came from a marketing angle, right? So, let me explain that. I believe that to be number one in our business, in your region, in an area, wherever in the country, right? You simply have to differentiate and kind of focus on your core competency. Everyone brings different value to the equation. My value was my ability to take a customer and offer an experience that made them emotional, and then document that and share it with the world, right? And so whether we, did crazy stunts for customers, provided gifts, got to know the customer before they came into the store, got to know who their favorite sports team was, and then, showed up with free tickets, front row, whatever it was, we were focused on, quote unquote, delighting the customer. When we didn't have to do that, many of these customers were subprime and did not have many choices, but we went above and beyond. We then documented that and then we promoted it all over the world, social kind of, gatekeeper free distribution. And that built our brand. We were, number one used car retailer in our region for probably close to a decade. If you go by, with various of the lenders. And actually growing up, I looked up a lot to Eastern's Motor. So I know Joel's part of this as well. I used to, well, back then, I mean, Joel was obviously,
Robert,
much younger. It was
Yeah.
Robert. Yeah. But I remember listening to their jingle and stuff like that. And like that inspired a lot of what I did.
That's so
And so
interesting.
that was the direction I took early on in the used car business that helped us differentiate and, grow the business from, nothing to, almost 3,000 units a year retail just in the Philly region.
Wow. Now, there's a couple things that really jump off the page to me. Number one, I've got to ask two questions just because I suffer from incurable curiosity. When you said that you weren't going to stay in the business, you didn't want to stay there. What was the driving force or the thought process? What is it that made you say, yeah, this is not what I plan to do? And then I'm curious, what changed and what made you say, oh man, I'm all in? Because that's where you are now. You're all in. So what were those defining moments?
So I'll tell you first of all what it wasn't. And it wasn't right away the money, because the money is addicting in this business, right? You make money, you're like, oh wow, right? I was pretty fortunate where I had opportunities and I explored, and I knew that I didn't know these terms, but like car business felt pretty low barrier to entry. And truthfully, a lot of it was just my peers, my community, even some very close relatives, where there was this like societal pressure on me as a kid. It's like, oh, car business, like that's kind of where you go if you have no other options or something. Right. And now, but hear me out,
with a
right?
finance degree, for God's sakes.
Well, suddenly, but here's where things get crazy, right? It's a Saturday and I'm in my early 20s and we sell, 15 cars, 20 cars, whatever it may be, right? Making, who knows how much gross, 100,000 plus in gross, whatever that amount was. And you're asking yourself, and by the way, that's where the money and the opportunity starts to kind of, change your perspective. But yes, just wait, like, how is that? Like, what is wrong with people? Like, it's clear that this industry, like you can provide a lot of value, do a lot of good. Now, what if I take this and scale this? And I can really do it in a meaningful way where I'm capturing market share. I'm bringing something unique to the community here, which allows me to grow the business and bring more customers. Just all these things started clicking for me. I didn't have all the answers, but I could just tell that there was opportunity. And it was all those things together that I said, I have to give this a shot. It would be completely reckless of me to throw out 10 years of experience that I just built up from being, as young as a teen, and then jumping into some corporate position where I'm paid to create PowerPoints. It didn't make sense in my head. And I knew that I had I knew that this is an industry where it doesn't limit my creativity, right? And you mentioned used cars specifically, right? Like before I knew the value of a franchise, which I really appreciate today, I always used to call it like the franchise shackles. It always boggled my mind. I said, us as used car dealers, we can do whatever we want. There's no limit on our creativity. It's truly the ultimate entrepreneur. And that's when I got hooked, when I could be creative day in and day out and just come up with new things to better the business.
I shudder to think of you as, instead of car dealership guy, corporate guy. You would have been, if you went in that other direction, finance major, you could have been corporate guy.
I wouldn't have survived.
Right. Another thing that really jumped off the page in that initial conversation you just shared was the similarities, the parallels between you and somebody that I think a lot of people have tremendous respect and admiration for, especially on the marketing side and innovation side, and that's Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk's father had that wine business, just like your dad had that business. They're both solid businesses. They were doing fine, no problem. They'd stood the test of time. And like Gary, where Gary said, what if we apply marketing? What if we apply social? What if we expand online? And he completely blew up that business. And you took that same path of innovation, reinvention, didn't get rid of the culture, didn't get rid of the DNA of the business, but you just layered on top of that your expertise in marketing. And also the third thing that jumped off was hospitality. I'm a big fan of Will Guidara and his book on reasonable hospitality. And people don't typically associate the word hospitality, delight a customer, with dealership operations. So how much, I guess my question is that in your mind, can any used car operator, whether they're franchise or independent, and they both have advantages and disadvantages, Yossi, but can any dealer in your mind take those lessons, marketing, social, innovation, hospitality, can they and should they embed those in their operations today?
Look, I think you have to, right? If you look at the competition in the market, everyone here that's been a dealer for, 10 years plus knows that the market has only gotten more competitive. I post sometimes about the days of like the early 2010s, which, not that long ago, where you could go to Manheim, Pennsylvania, the largest auction in the world, and you could steal cars from certain lanes for like an hour a day, 2 hours a day, right? Post 2015, 2016, that went away.
That's
right?
over.
When venture funding especially got into them, I mean, things changed significantly, and those days were long gone. And I used to say like, this business, right? It's about catching the latest trend in order to maximize the used car business, right? There's always a new trend. There's always a wave to ride with respect to, vehicle inventory, right? We know that now many dealers are taking advantage of the used EV tax credit, right? It's a phenomenal incentive that is obviously, it's a gift. And so like, there's always things like this. It's not always government subsidized, but suddenly you have a line of vehicles that for whatever reason, the books, there's a massive spread and, you can capitalize on that. But the point is, I think it's all about, keeping your ear to the ground and, spotting those trends. It's not, you still have your core competencies as a dealer. Like why should I shop at your spot, right? What are you the best at? Right. And there has to be something that you offer at the end of the day for someone to bring me to your store. Experience is obviously the ideal thing because, it's less so competing on price, more so building value. But I do think that it's not that every dealer can do it. It's every dealer needs to be thinking about it if they want to survive the test of time and really thrive as a used car dealer, because competition is only going to increase. It's not going to go anywhere. And if you just look at the trends from the last 10 years, you see the dealer counts have shrunk, consolidation is heating up. So things are getting more challenging, but that spells out opportunity as well.
It's funny you say that because, again, I'm sitting here, I'm going to be 65 in, a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. And, I've always heard about the good old days. And it occurred to me, probably 30 years ago, that this year is the good old days. 2-3 years from now, we're going to go, oh, do you remember 2020? Oh, man, Yossi, those were the good old days. Just like you said, 2010 was the good old days. 1998, yep. Even with the recession, they were the good old days. We had cheap money. Credit was easy. Anybody could freaking buy a house, right? Wasn't terrible. It was a tough time in some respects, of course. But this year, today is the good old days. You shouldn't be waiting. The future is like right now, not to be cliche. From your mind, Yossi, and I love what you're sharing. One of the other things that seems to be paramount in any great organization, their foundational element is always their people, isn't it? It's always their people. I take it in your independent that your dad built that foundation and that you brought it up to another level like Joel has at Easterns. It's built on people, right? Joel said something that I think I don't think you could overemphasize this. He said, David, I don't care if you're a recon tech, if you're a detailer, if you're in support, if you work in the office, we're all car salespeople. We do one thing. Nothing happens till we sell a car. So everybody is in sales. When we have celebrations, we bring recon, we bring the techs, we bring the everybody's together in that. You've done something that's just been kind of remarkable in that it seemed like it started out, I don't know if it started as a whim or something you just said, hey, this would be kind of great to do for the industry, but your job board seems like it's just blown up, taken on a life of its own, but it serves a really important purpose because it has that potential to connect that associate with hopefully the right home in terms of their next dealership opportunity and bring that dealership one step closer to having, a great team, the team that they need, the team that they want. Could you talk about how did the job board come about and what are some of the things that you've learned through it or maybe stories that put a smile on your face?
David, my prior company was a venture-backed company where we raised close to $60 million to build an online retailer based in the
remember
Northeast.
that one. That's where we first met.
A lot of what
Yeah.
yeah. Well, a lot of what we did was, in hindsight, a lot of what we did was, we were sort of a solution looking for a problem, right? There was plenty of other great competition in the market, right? It was almost like what we were offering was not needed. And I've taken, with Car Dealership Guy, I took a different approach, right? I said, I am going to build as lean as possible, right? I don't want to have a toothpick in this business that I don't need. And the way you do that is by being very, very close to the audience, right? The audience being primarily dealers and the automotive retail community. And one of the big requests that I consistently got, and if you took an AI, robot and you just scanned my direct messages, you would have $5 billion business ideas in there because it's all the feedback that people give me, right? So one of the big things that people reach out to me for all the time is they see the lots of how many followers I have and whatnot. And they say, hey, can you please help me? I need to find a new GM in Wisconsin, a new GM in Florida, whatever. So I took that and I said, look, I have zero desire to be a recruiter. I didn't wake up and say I want to be a recruiter or have a job board. By the way, the job board is free completely to dealers. But then I said, how can I solve this for the industry, right? Like I have an advantage where I don't have a board sitting over my head. I don't have institutional capital invested. I don't need to hit earnings in 3 months. I can do whatever the fuck I want to do. And the beauty of that is that I can truly, put things out there that create value. I don't have to like squeeze the lemon and try to monetize them in a way that, is just unnatural. I can just put them out there into the world, bring that value, and just see where it goes. And the job board is like a perfect manifestation of that because the only reason I did it was because dealers asked for it. They're like, hey, can you connect dealers with employees? And, we spun it up, cdgjobs.com. Plenty of people are hiring on there. It's been extremely successful. We did launch a more kind of premium tier called cdgrecruiting.com, which is for like, bespoke, more like headhunting. So that's available as well. But CDG Jobs is free and it's been working really great. And again, it's something so simple, right? All we're doing is we're connecting people, but it's something that's so important. And I want to connect that to another note that I had written down here actually that I plan on, mentioning during this conversation, which is that like, this is the ethos of the car business, right? When I think about what made us at, the number one dealer in the region and things like that, it was never like the fancy spectacles and stuff like that. It was always the simple stuff. I had a podcast with Daryl Cunningham, CEO of Group One, and he said it like 10 times, and I'm going to repeat it, right? We're a 5% net margin business, right? Unless you're Carvana, then you're an 11% adjusted EBITDA business. But we're a 5% net margin business. And when you're a 5% net margin business, right, there is no room for waste. And so everything we do, like we grow up on practicality, right, on efficiency and finding, doing the basics so well and doing them consistently. And I think that's what makes this industry. That's the philosophy that I've sort of ported from the car business to what I do today. We're an extremely lean company, right? I can count our entire team on 2 hands. And that's, and trust me, that's not a lot when you look at the amount of content we put out. We have video, audio, podcast, like newsletter, news, social. I mean, it's honestly remarkable, but it's the same car business mentality that hasn't left me, right? I don't care if it's a penny or $1 million. I don't want to waste. I want to be efficient and focus on the fundamentals.
I love that. Is there how long, the job board's been out for how long? Over a year?
The job board has been for, I would say about a year, a little bit less.
Are there any for lack of a better term, think of a dating site, love connections that have happened, just anecdote stories that just, like I said, that just go like this, you always hear, hey, if I could just make one person's life better. You hear that all the time. If I can, and it sounds so cliche, but I mean, let's just be real. You don't ever know, butterfly effect, you don't ever know that 100%. I can make that one connection. That was the difference between that organization being able to propel forward, be able to grow, be able to sustain or survive. Like, is there anything in particular that just jumps out of your mind, out of that job board that just goes, man, that's why I do it, and I'm cool with it being free?
So, first of all, for the biggest supporters in the room, there is a paid option, so let's not neglect that.
No. Hey, gotta pay the bill. Gotta pay those 10 people.
But in all seriousness, like that's a big thing with my ethos. It's that, you know, I don't believe that something like that should be gate kept. You could post, I think, up to 5 roles free, right? So like people, you can post free, please. Like I encourage everyone.
Where do they
I
go
want
to
answer
do
your
that, by the
question.
way? CDG.com?
CDGjobs.com.
Okay, cool.
I want to, so interesting story. I interviewed a guy the other day named Kyle Coleman. He's a dealer. He came to my podcast and he told me, he said, Yossi, he said, I listened to your podcast a year ago with Brett Morgan and I heard a story.
Great one.
And he inspired me to take the leap from general manager to try to become an owner. This gentleman now owns, I think, is it 4 rooftops or maybe 2, closing on 2 more. But mind you, this has all happened in the last like 6 to 9 months. And he told me on the podcast, like, this is like, your podcast is the reason I did this. Like, you know, got inspired and got, you know, the initial knowledge and blah, blah, blah. And like, I think that's incredible. And similar thing is for the job board, you know, if I can't name something off the top of my head, but if you just cycle through LinkedIn, people share, like whenever someone gets, you know, finds a role, and they reach out to us, thanking us, say, hey, love it. Do you mind sharing? And you just see people say, hey, I found my next, you know, role, my next job, my next opportunity through this. And I think I don't even appreciate that yet, like how powerful that is. My wife reminds me all the time, you know, she's like, this is like incredible. She sees like the podcast, the numbers, right? The listeners, and just the concentration of car dealers that listen to the podcast. For anyone that doesn't know about it, it's Car Dealership Guy podcast on every platform. But you know, that's, to me, it's like, it's hard when everything is done virtually, it's kind of hard to really feel it. But you know, just seeing those numbers, it's like, wow, there's real people in this industry kind of learning from each other, and just kind of like democratized 20 group that's available, you know, 24/7, 365, comes out every Tuesday and Thursday on your phone. So it's just been an incredible journey that I kind of fell into. But I just love being able to connect all day and, you know, kind of democratize information to the industry. It's extremely, extremely powerful.
I love it. And you know, you've done a lot, man, in a very short period of time in terms of having a positive impact and being able to reach so many different layers of retail automotive. So on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you. Before I jump into a question to kind of help wrap things up and kind of tie this up into a bow as it pertains to used car operations, you know, you said something, I'm just going to go where I go. You know, you talk about, you know, the power of impacting somebody, and that, what a great story about that person who listened to that podcast. I mean, and not many folks I could think of that would be a more inspirational or great episode to listen to. That one on you have so many, but the one on Brett Morgan is tremendous in what they're doing down there in Florida. But you know, you happen to have a few people sitting at your house that I'm curious from their perspective. You're not just CDG, you're not just Yossi, you're dad, right? And you're the husband. And I'm curious, first of all, you and your wife have known each other, been together how long?
9 years.
9 years. So when she met,
yep.
So this is way before CDG. This is when you were in the Get a Car. This is when you were the independent car dealer.
Even before that, yeah.
Even before then.
That.
So I'm just curious what her thoughts on any in general, like anything that you learned from her that she's done to inspire you in retail automotive.
Wow, that's a phenomenal question. So I love when someone goes deep into the question and thinks, you know, second, third layer, because that's what I try to do on my podcast, and I admire people that are able to do that. So when Lee met me, I was a young 20-year-old, and I had never really committed to a girlfriend yet. Like I was kind of really focused on, obviously having fun, but my, work and kind of building something. I was just very motivated and ambitious. And so I was very, I would say, not the right word, but like I viewed many things more transactionally in life. And Lee is this extremely warm person, comes from like a rural town, super, super family oriented, which I've always been as well. But she's on another level. And so what Lee did was Lee brought balance to how I think, not how I work, because I still work like an animal. But she definitely brought balance to how I think and how I just perceive the world. And I think that was very, very healthy. I think it was just, it's hard to say kind of how that seeped into my creations over the years.
Yeah.
But she's been, I mean, listen, I can tell you straight up, there would not be any car dealership guy without Lee. So she's just been insanely supportive, holding the 3 kids under 4, kind of hard to do.
God bless her.
If you don't have an extremely supportive wife or husband. And so, yeah, it's been, she kind of brought that balance of, kind of seeing things from a more empathetic perspective, which I think I lacked. And I think that's been very helpful, especially as I build us out, as we create content, and as we think about positioning and making sure we're objective and thinking about all your stakeholders and stuff like that. These are things that, a lot of it is driven by your values that you're raised with, but also that, you're grown up with. And at this point, I've been with her pretty much 33% of my life. And so she's had a massive impact.
That's tremendous. And thank you for taking the time to share that. I would suspect that she can't help at times to listen to your podcast episodes from time to time, to look at your content, and perhaps to even, give you some feedback. But it's so interesting. There's something called the law of indirect effort that Zig Ziglar used to talk about all the time. You get more through indirect means than through direct means. And so it's incredible to think of how much the people we care about, our wives, our partners, our husbands, have an impact on our life. Now, you've got also 3 little ones, right? And your 3 little ones, do you imagine any of those littles, any or all, being little car dealership guys or little car dealership girls staying in this business?
When I looked at my dad, maybe, I don't know, who knows how long, 10 years ago, more than that actually at this point, and I said, what do you think I should do? He gave me a gift, because what he said is, you have to decide. I mean, I'm not going to tell you have to be a dealer, or it was never like that for me. I always had all the options available to me. And when I say that, go to Wall Street, right? Start my own company, work with the family business and grow into that. I was never forced to do anything. And I think there's something beautiful in that, where I had the opportunity to really explore, and I'm still exploring, right? Look what I'm doing now, right? Who would have thought that I would be growing a media company? I mean, I didn't even know what that meant 2 years ago. And so I think that, giving that to our kids is a huge gift. I speak with some dealer sons and daughters, not many, but I do speak with some that are, to me at least, look miserable. I mean that. I see people that almost hey, they kind of have to do this. Mm-hmm. Again, most that I see are doing well, or seem to be positioned what's right for them, or maybe one of the kids wanted to kind of get into it, whatever. But I do speak with some that are, they feel stuck. And I think I had a gift where I was in the opportunity. I busted my ass. I was always, the hardest worker. At least I strive to be the hardest worker. But I was never forced to do any of that. And I think that's the true gift to give our kids, right? My kids will be exposed to this world. They'll be exposed to media. They'll be exposed to the dealership. They'll be exposed to everything. And at the end of the day, if that is where they decide to kind of, make their mark and go in and do what it is, I'm fine with that, as long as they do it best. I'm a pretty conservative guy, but I have one tattoo, which people are always shocked when they hear that about me. They're like, do you really? I do. It's actually right here below my ribs. And it says, in Latin, it says, do what you do and do it well. And so a big thing for me in life is just if you're going to do something, be the best at it, right? Don't be mediocre. I don't care what it is. If you're going to be knitting all day, whatever, be a farmer, plumbing, internet entrepreneur, whatever you're going to do, I just believe that you have to be the best at what you do and put your full effort into it.
I love it. I will never forget watching the Pete Maravich story. It was never came out anywhere. It was actually funded by the guy that owned Chick-fil-A, of all things. He was a huge fan of Pete Maravich. Pete Maravich, in that story, he was a freshman playing on the varsity basketball team, right? And he had this cheerleader that he really liked, and she was dating I think a senior on the basketball team. But anyways, he asked her, "Are you going to be a professional dancer?" She said, "No." He said, "Then why are you doing this now? If your intention is not to be the best at it, why are you wasting your time even doing it now?" And famously, one of the school projects is, what do you want to do when you grow up? What's your goal? And he said, I want to be the first basketball player to get paid $1 million. The whole class laughed at him when he recited this story. Guess what? He was the first basketball player ever to make $1 million. So I think that's a lesson that cannot be told too often. I appreciate you sharing that. So let's use that as the note for closing this up. So why be a used car operator if you're not going to be the best at it? And I bring that up because, for years and years, Yossi, you brought up franchise dealers. New cars has always led the way. They dominate. If you work in a franchise dealership, the majority of the conversations, the majority of the meetings, the ad budget, everything is new cars, new cars, new cars. Used cars was always the icing on the cake. And I believe that the landscape of our business has forever changed. It's not that new cars won't be important, but I believe that used cars now is the icing on the cake. And if you're going to be a used car operator, lesson one, it's not something that you're going to do well if you dabble in it. Do you agree?
I mean, I not just agree, I insanely agree. I think that especially in the environment we're in today where, new car margins are compressing extremely quickly, inventories are rising again.
It's not a good business model right now.
Well, tough business, but challenging, right? And some are better than others, right? If you're a Toyota dealer, you're maybe not feeling the pain as much.
But even Toyota, Yossi, is down almost 16% year over year in net profit. So it's unfavorable conditions to your point. The last time I looked, there were 0 profitable new car dealers out there.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that I do still think, again, if we're comparing
new car departments, let me clarify.
Yeah, if we're looking 5 years, it's still very, performing very well. But I just agree with you that, used it used to be, when I was growing up in the business, it felt like for many, franchisees, it was a kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
Right. You'd see these trades come to the auction, be like, what is this? Right. Now we're not there anymore. Right. Now you go down, you see that beautiful, most expensive dealership in town, and they have a, 2001 Toyota Corolla on the front line.
If they're smart.
So if they're smart, right, things have changed. And, people are turning over every stone. They're sourcing cars from every place possible, right? Obviously, the days of just auctions are long gone, right? Focusing on really bringing in those vehicles from the customers as much as you can, and really capitalizing on that opportunity and making sure that, you have a well-oiled operation when it comes to the recon, right? Having specific operations and processes for that. Right, getting the recon done as efficiently as possible. I mean, all these little things that add to the big things, because it's just the best. I speak with a lot of COOs, which I love, because they're different than the CEOs. And the COOs of these dealer groups, again, primarily bigger ones, but also smaller operations where it's maybe a couple stores, maybe even one, in which case it's typically the owner operator or their partner. The COOs are, I love talking about the detail. I had a COO from the Maryland area. And we were just talking about details, right? I'm like, tell me, how do you run your group? And he's like, Yossi, you know how I run my group? He said, I'm the type of guy that, well, I told him, I said, well, I grew up with a dad that where the toothpaste was running out in the toothpaste tube, he would squeeze it to the last drip because he didn't want to waste,
I'm
right?
that guy.
But hear me out. And yeah, well, I mean, I'm too. It's scarred into my head at this point. But then this guy tells me, and by the way, it's Jack Ballinghoff. Jack tells me, he's like, Yossi, you know what I do? He's like, I don't just squeeze that toothpaste out of the tube to the last drop. I'll get a contraption in order to rig it so I can get everything out of there. And I was like, that's a used car guy. Yeah. That's a used car guy where you can take every efficiency you can find in order to make ends meet and to be stronger in your market. Like, that's a used car guy.
So if there's a takeaway to every used car dealer out there, and you were to say, okay, if I'm going to share one thing with you, as an independent operator that dominated the region, as somebody who has spoken to some of the best operators on planet Earth, one of the things you just said is you got to squeeze every efficiency out of everywhere. You've got to master every process. Everything matters. Everything counts. And you got to get all in serious about being all in on this business. Is that basically the takeaway?
Partially, because I'm going to take it one step further. Like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. You got to get down to the atomic unit of your business, right? One thing at a time. How are we greeting the customer, right? Simple, something but show me exactly. I want to see it all, right? Get down to the atomic unit and bring solutions. It's not difficult. Now to answer your question, right? The best people I've seen, again, it's consistently, it's doing the fundamentals consistently and doing them best. It's not the fancy stuff. The fancy stuff will elevate you and it will help you differentiate and keep going. But you build on the fancy stuff when you have the foundation, a strong foundation and the fundamentals down. And, as a used car guy, it's like ingrained in my head. Is that front line straight? Are the cars clean, right? Are all the buyer guides on the car? Right? Are all the cars being priced appropriately on the proper regimen and timing? Like all these little things. Is the bathroom clean? Right? I'm talking about the physical world stuff right now, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like it's the basics that add up to the big thing. And if you do the basics well, it permeates through your organization, through everything. And so, I always say like we had like a philosophy at all my companies, including CDG, which is like, we got to get 1% better every single day. If you wake up in the morning and you didn't do one thing, whether it was cancel a bill that you weren't using that service anymore, or fix a broken integration online, or, sign up a new lender that can help you in your business, or, change your pricing algorithm so you're repricing at a different kind of cadence, whatever it is. If you're not getting 1% better every single day, you're truly missing out. I think that's the key to becoming the top operator.
I did the math on that, Yossi. I love that. If you do the math, 1% better on January 1st, and you do it every single day, at the end of the year, you are 37x better. It's amazing what the seemingly little minor things can do in the grand scheme of life. Just one quick bonus question. Anything in particular you're excited about in this upcoming NADA?
Anything particular? Well, I'm excited for my party. So I know that's selfish. No, I'm having an NADA party. Yeah, exactly. So you're going to be there and it's going to be great. In all seriousness, look, I think that AI is real. I know we hear AI, all the hype. It is real. It is going to take the best in our industry and make them better. We're going to see a bigger dispersion between the best and the worst. Agreed. The worst will likely not survive. But it is going to make the best a lot better. And I think that it's just starting to really kind of get into our operations. We're dealing with chatbots and stuff like that. That's kind of like the higher level. There's also the kind of the second level where we're dealing with, I just had Jim Roche from WarCloud on my podcast where we spoke about like smart sourcing, which pretty much, getting
great
down
company,
to like
menial WarCloud.
Great company, menial tasks at the dealership that are just going to be, automated and whatnot, such as, like warranty reimbursements, right? That's a very basic use case that WarCloud does, but there's plenty of other use cases for this at the dealership. I think here's the bottom line. Here's the punchline, right? We're going to see much more efficiencies, but we're also going to be moving to a world where a lot more is done by robots. And what differentiates you in a world that is increasingly, handled by robots? Two things: your people and your brand. And so I think that it's incredibly important to kind of double down on who we are as companies. What is our brand? What is our culture? Because just think about it, right? As technology evolves, margins compress, right? Things get more commoditized. Margins will continue compressing on a long time horizon, if you ask me. But, and there will be fewer players, more consolidation, but the players that remain will be stronger because they will have powerful brands or else they won't survive. And you just build powerful brands with clear values and great people.
I love it. I've been looking forward to the conversation. I knew it was going to be great. You've gone literally 37x times that.
Appreciate it.
Tremendous value. Love what you're doing in the industry. If you're one of the 4 people that don't know CDG or you don't know Yossi, you could find him. First of all, the job board was cdgjobs.com. The podcast is CDG Podcast, right? You're going to find that there, Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get podcasts.
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is actually to go to our main website, which is dealershipguy.com. And if you go to dealershipguy.com, you put your email there. You're joining an email with 85,000 other subscribers, highly concentrated in automotive. And from there, you will receive our podcasts, our job board updates. I mean, we're very, very selective. So, minimum 2 emails a week. Or max, you can get like 10, but you choose. So we don't spam. You get 1 to 2 emails a week at the minimum, which is what most people opt for. And from there, you get all the updates. You see the podcast, you see the latest newsletters, our latest columns, job board updates, daily news. I mean, pretty much everything gets centralized right in there.
Listen, wish you all the best. Much continued success. All the best, obviously, for you, your wonderful wife Lee, and your kids, your family, and all the best as we go into the holiday season. Look forward to seeing you for certain at NADA, if not before. And can't thank you enough for taking the time to contribute tremendously to our used car event. Yossi Levi, thank you so much. For anybody
David,
that wants to connect,
you.
like you said, dealershipguy.com, subscribe there, and you get access to so much tremendous content, but not just content, usable, relevant content. So Yossi, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you soon.